Hello everyone, my name is Julia and welcome back to my digital classroom. Today is lesson 8 out of 10 in our unit on the executive branch of the American government. Today's topic is going to be on succession. Our source, as always, is from iCivics. If you need any of the materials from today's lesson, go ahead and give that QR code a click or a scan. And as you know, I am still committed to giving you a lesson in 10 minutes or less, so let's jump right into it. Our lesson objectives are pretty short and sweet. Today you're just going to recall the order and the purpose for the presidential line of succession. So first, before we even move forward, let's define succession. Succession is just the list of people who will come after the president if the president is unable to do his job. So basically, who will do the job if the president can't? So let's do a warm-up. You're going to visit this website. It's called Dot Storming. You can either scan the QR code on the top right or type in the URL that's listed on the screen. Just enter your name to join. You don't need to make an account. And you're going to answer the following prompt. Talk about bad timing. You just found out that your school's principal is stepping down immediately. Your school has no idea what to do. Who takes over? Who should succeed? Create a succession plan for the school that addresses the questions below. You don't need to answer all of them, just at least contemplate a couple of them in your answer. Who steps in? Does this person become the new permanent principal? Why or why not? If that person is not available to step in, who would make everyday decisions for the school? What would qualify this person to be in charge? Could the school function without a replacement? Why or why not? Go ahead and take a few minutes to answer this. Don't let this take you forever, maybe 5 minutes. Definitely don't get past 10 minutes. Just contemplate this idea because it'll apply to the presidency in a moment. So go ahead and pause the video, contemplate that response, and I'll see you back in a couple minutes. All right, let's continue on. Let's talk about the presidential line of succession. So you've already contemplated a little bit of what might happen if your principal were to step down, but what about the president? The presidential line of succession is the list of people who will assume the role of president if the president is unable to fulfill his or her duties in office. Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution tells us all about this, and it tells us that that responsibility should go to the vice president. Okay, cool, but does the vice president just carry out the responsibilities of the presidency until someone else is elected? Like, is there a whole new election here? Or does the vice president just become the new president? Great question. Well, we still don't have a super clear answer to this, but in 1841, President John Taylor just kind of took it upon himself to mean that he becomes the president. So that's exactly what happened. Every time the president has had to step down since then, the same mentality has been applied. There's never been a re-election if a president has had to step down for any reason. So, what would happen if the vice president needs to get replaced? Well, the 25th Amendment of the Constitution says that the new president, or the vice president who has now assumed the presidency, can appoint a new vice president if that office is empty. That also means that if the president is in office and a vice president dies, then the president can pick someone else to be vice president. So here's an interesting string of what this might look like. In 1973, President Richard Nixon, who is here on the far left, his vice president, Spiro Agnew, resigned. This is Spiro Agnew, so he is resigned. Nixon then appointed Gerald Ford as his replacement. So the president is President Nixon, vice president is Gerald Ford. In 1974, President Nixon resigned, and then Gerald Ford became the new president. So now there's no vice president. So Ford then appointed Nelson Rockefeller, who is this guy here, as the vice president. What a presidency. If you know anything about Nixon's presidency, do a little research on the Watergate scandal. You might see that that might have something to do with it. But either way, you can see all this policy being put into place. But who would come next? Well, that's a great question, and it's something that legislatures have thought a lot about. Of course, first you have your president, then you've got your vice president, then comes the Speaker of the House of Representatives, then the President pro tempore of the Senate. Now, the Speaker of the House and the President pro tempore of the Senate are basically just your top dogs in the House and the Senate, just the person who is in charge of each of those places. Then, number 5 in that list is any of the cabinet members, but it's not just any of them, it's an order of the establishment of their office. And I'll show you what I mean by that. But it begs the question, if the cabinet members are the people who advise the president, why wouldn't they come right after the vice president? Here's why. Everyone in the House of Legislative and the House of Representatives and in the Senate has been elected by the people. The cabinet is not elected by the people. So this at least preserves the idea that the president would be elected by the people. So, let me show you this list. Here is the presidential line of succession. So I don't know if I can put my face anywhere where it won't cover anything, so just bear with me. But as you can see here, first the vice president, then the Speaker of the House, the president pro tempore of the Senate, and then every single cabinet position. Yes, it has to go in this order. They just did it based on which were created first, then next, so this order will still be preserved. Have we ever gotten this far? No, absolutely not. We've never gotten past the vice president. Especially because, let's address this question before I get ahead of myself. How could someone not on this list assume the presidency? Well, let's go back a slide. Oops, it's not all for now, folks. Sorry. So on this slide, remember that Gerald Ford was not the original vice president. He was never elected by the people. So, whenever he became president, he was not elected by the people, but he went all the way above everyone else because he was vice president, and the vice president is still second in line no matter what. Interesting, huh? So, that is how someone could on this that is not on the list could assume the presidency if they end up getting put into that vice president spot, or if they end up assuming a role without being elected or selected the first time. So now I put a red box around the first three is because that's the only thing that I think you need to memorize. If anything, remember vice president, speaker of the House, president pro tempore of the Senate, and then cabinet. That's all you really need to remember. And if this little phrase helps you, don't let it confuse you if it does. But you can say Vice Speaker of the Senate. Vice Speaker of the Senate tells you the list that they go in. Vice President, Speaker of the House, President pro tempore of the Senate. Just don't let the term Speaker of the Senate confuse you because that does not exist. So, that is all I have for you today, as you have already seen. If you have any questions for me, feel free to follow up on Twitter. You can find me at Giulia Pucci edu. You can also scan the QR code on the left side of your screen, juliapucci.weebly.com. All my contact information is there for you. That is all for now, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye!